2025 Honda CRF250 is finally here, and we are excited to get our first chance to ride it here at Fox Raceway today. We know a lot about this bike over the last few years. It was all new in 2022, and now it's got some significant updates for the 2025 season.
Upside down.
I think it needs to race a Honda now.
This year is a big one for Honda. Not only did they update the 250, but they also updated the 450, kind of a unique program for Honda, and they added a 250 Works Edition model for this new model season. Pretty exciting to have that Works Edition available in the 250 platform. Big updates, but it's not an all-new bike, just a long list of minor changes that will make this bike different on the track. So the Honda platform, the 450 was all new in 2021, this 250 was all new in 2022, and now this bike is based off of that 2022 model with a lot of significant changes that hopefully will help the handling and the complaints that we had with this bike. Over the last few years, since 2022, we've complained big time about the ultra stiff Showa spring forks on the Honda CRF250. Now this bike has new suspension settings for 2025. Also the frame. It's been known for being kind of a rigid frame and not very comfortable on the track, especially for the 450 model, but 250 and 450 for 2025 have an updated frame. Geometry is the same, but the flex characteristics have been optimized to hopefully provide better handling on the track. Also, new subframe mounting location, as I mentioned, new suspension settings. We're excited to see how it works. As far as the engine goes, it did not see any major updates inside, but as far as the air intake going in and air coming out, both those have been updated. It's got an all-new air box. Now this is based off of what the factory HRC Honda guys have been running for the last few years. Gone is the upside down air filter, and now it's kind of a wall-mounted air filter, kind of a unique system going on here. And on the muffler is new for 2025, as well as updated map settings. So engine, very similar to last year. Most of the updates were tailored onto the handling of this bike, but we are excited to see how the new intake and the new muffler and the new mapping work on the track. So let's suit up and see how it is. First impressions on the Honda 250 2025. Just like last year, this thing is a whipping machine. It is so easy to whip and flick around the track. It still feels like a Honda. It doesn't feel like a all-new bike or like a different brand, but honestly, I'm super pumped with it. Obviously, Honda, they gave us a perfect track today. They told the guys at Fox Raceway not to rip it deep so that these bikes will feel a little bit faster. So excited to get on last year's bike and compare it to this one here soon now. All right, now it's 2024 time. Disclaimer though, this bike does have suspension. REP suspension did soften up the forks on this thing to fix it for us for last year's bike. So not gonna be a good test of suspension today, but at least we can test maybe the frame and definitely the power characteristics, see if we can notice the difference between last year's bike versus the new one.
Pretty good. I actually feel it's a pretty good improvement. It shows you front wheel grip. Just initial crack of the throttle feels like it just connects to the rear wheel really easy. And I was trying to go outside and find some like loam to see like the RPM pickup. The bike revs up pretty easy and pretty nice. Model, I still have to pop the clutch a little. The crust of the fork makes the bike feel much flatter and much easier to corner. It's a little bit on the soft side, like if you're really hard on your brake, like running it in deep. But I feel like for a consumer standpoint, the bike's really improved. Obviously, we're out at a media day. The tracks are always amazing on media days. It's the first day of riding it.
My impressions going back and forth, the bodywork is crazy different. It's talking to Shane Drew, he's the chassis manager or crew chief for the HRC Honda team, and he said the first thing that the Lawrence brothers said when they went from the 2021 super wide in the back, they could grip on super easy onto the 21. You come onto the 22, the Lawrence brothers said the bike's too skinny, they can't hold on. That was the first thing I noticed on the 25. It's a little bit wider here in the middle, and then it bows out a little bit more in the shrouds, and it's equal on both sides with a lot more surface area for gripping with your legs. So that was something I really appreciated about that bike.
Definitely noticeable. Like when you're getting back, you can definitely feel like as you roll back to go through the rollers over here, you could feel your leg placement lock into the bike, and you're able to like maneuver the front end where you want. Definitely easier. Overall, just all the little detail that they put into this bike has definitely been an improvement for day one. Like I said, the track's groomed perfect first day on it. We'll get her out to home base at GH, ride it in the dry, slippery, no traction, lots of bumps, and see where she's at. All
right, so that's a good first impressions, but it's time to go learn some more technical details about this bike and talk about that. One of the main changes of this bike is the frame. Now, obviously, I already talked about the rigidity characteristics that are different, but also this subframe mounting point right here. It almost feels like they took a page out of KTM's book where KTM changed the shock tower mount. Now, the subframe mount has been moved further back on this 2025 model. You can see up here where the tank mount is, kind of the tank bracket. That's where the subframe used to connect to, but now by moving it back here, Shane Drew, he was here talking to me all about the details about this bike, and he said by moving that position where the subframe mounts will actually take harshness out when you're hitting bumps coming into corners. So the rear end won't affect the front end as much coming into turns, and that's similar to what happened with KTM when they messed with the shock tower mount as well. Talking more about the frame has been made stiffer for 2025, and it's kind of a weird concept and not a great marketing tool. It's a bad idea for Honda to say, we made our bike stiffer, because this bike has been known for being too stiff in the past. Talking to Shane, talking to Trey Kennard, talking to more engineers from Honda, they say they actually have to make the frame stiffer so that it stays more planted, more solid, and the suspension is able to work how it is supposed to. So stiffer frame equals softer, more plush, more compliant bike on the track, and that was Honda's goal for 2025. Anybody who knows a little bit about frames and aluminum frames, they do flex, and when they flex too much, they can swing back and spit you off the bike really easily. Now by making it a little bit stiffer, hopefully makes it better on the track, and today, that's what we felt. So all of the updates for this model were inspired by the Lawrence brothers and the factory HRC Honda team, that this is the bike that they've had the most influence on, from factory riders to the production bike. Working together with that stiffer frame is also new suspension. So the outer tube shape has been changed, a little bit stiffer. Triple clamps also a little bit stiffer. The fork lugs are a little bit stiffer, and the axle was changed just slightly as well. Went from a nut to a bolt. So the bolt actually goes into the axle, kind of like the KTM style, to make the front end a little more planted. Factory HRC Honda, they've been putting braces on their frames, finding different ways to make their frames stiffer. Now those changes are trickling onto the stock production bikes. Working together with the component changes are new valving inside of these Showa spring forks. So it's got the same spring rate as last year at 4.8, but the valving inside much, much softer, and that's something we really appreciate. Last year's forks, way too stiff. These ones, much softer. Talking about the shock, this thing has been changed quite a bit as well. The shock body has been updated to fit into the new subframe. So if you have a old A-kit Showa shock, it will not fit on this new 2025 model. So the shock body's been changed, the valving has been changed. Also the spring rate has been dropped down. It was a 5.2, now it is a 5.0. On the rear, shock travel, same. Coating on the shock shaft is a little different for 2025. The spring is actually a little smaller, a little bit lighter, but overall travel is the same. While we're down here, I should also mention that the linkage is new for 2025. So Honda, in 2017, they introduced a new split linkage with single dog bones on each side of the link arms. So they moved independently. Now it's connected just like a standard KTM or Yamaha, Kawasaki model. So linkage is a little bit stiffer because of that, a little bit stronger, and that's another influence that comes from Jet Lawrence and Hunter Lawrence. They've already been doing that on their factory bikes. Now it moves onto the production bike. So we had 3 test riders out here going back to back, 2024 versus 2025. We'll talk about the handling and then we'll get into the engine in just a second. Justin Lee, Dennis Stapleton, and myself back to back on both models, and it was pretty impressive. Of course, the plastics are hugely noticeable, much more surface area, much easier to grip the bike in the rear. I was getting my legs caught up here on the shrouds a couple times when we were getting into some of the ruts, so that's something to keep your eye out on. I love the look of the new shrouds, but I was getting my leg caught up here. As for handling, now the 2024, 23, and 22 Honda CRF250, extremely stiff forks. They were like 2x4s on the front of that bike. Way too stiff. Once you got those figured out, the bike handled pretty good. It's a 250. 450, now that's a whole nother story. The 450 is a lot harder to get comfortable in the handling department. 250, because it's lighter, because it's slower, less rotating mass, it's not as hard to get it to handle well. However, I was impressed by the differences between the 24 and 25 model. This bike had less wiggle coming into corners. Dennis Stapleton, he noticed it more than I did. This bike feels more planted and more confident in what the wheels are doing coming into the turns, where the 2024 model, a little more nervous, and it makes you chop the throttle and hit the brakes sooner coming into turns. So chassis, more comfortable on this bike. I'm excited to ride it on a rougher track, hopefully soon, probably tomorrow at Glen Helen, and that will really tell me exactly how this chassis is. All right, so now let's talk about this engine. I first jumped on the 2025 model this morning. I rode it for photos and videos, had some fun getting used to it. It did feel good, but like I mentioned, the track was also really good as well. It still felt like a Honda, didn't feel like an all-new bike with an amazing engine. Then I jumped on the 2024 model. I rode that around. I was like, yeah, it's a little bit slower, but it's not too bad. Maybe if I was looking for an upgraded bike, I would want the 25 for the chassis, but it's not so much the engine. Then I jumped back on the 2025 model and I was impressed with the engine. Going back to back multiple times, I was able to feel the initial throttle response much stronger on this bike due to the new airbox, the new straighter intake, also the new muffler, and the updated mapping. All 3 of those things combined definitely woke up the engine of this Honda 250 quite a bit. So if you ride it in through the pits, or if you just go out and ride it by itself, it doesn't feel like a crazy improvement, but once you ride both bikes back to back, that's when you can really dissect the details. It is quite a bit stronger, quite a bit faster, and honestly, I would recommend buying this bike. If you like the old 2025 model, this is a significant jump up on the power department, but it is a better Honda, and I'm excited to see how it does compare against the other bikes once we get them all together. A couple more quick bits on the rear end. The chain slider is new. So the swing arm is the same, but this slider is actually a couple millimeters taller, helping the chain geometry and helping the chain torque to affect the chassis less and improve it. So this is something that comes from factory Honda. It's now on the 2025 model. Also, the shock is much easier to take on and off. Talking to the guys, just pull off the side number panels, pull off the rear muffler, and you can pull it down through the side, pull the front of the linkage out, and then the shock will come out and then out to the right. So you don't have to take the whole subframe apart. You don't have to loosen the clamp on the throttle body. All those things are much nicer. With that, the ECU, it used to be packed down here behind the mud flap. In mud races, you would get a bunch of mud and water stuck in your ECU box and it'd kind of be gross. Now they repositioned the ECU to be up here near the air filter. So that's another thing that helps centralize mass and also make things a little easier to work on. So if you have $8,299 laying around, you too can pick up a 2025 Honda CRF250. Overall, really impressed with the updates. The chassis made huge improvements. The engine made some good improvements as well. And now I'm super excited to see how this chassis works on the 2025 Honda 450. We'll be riding that here in a couple weeks. So thank you guys for tuning into this video. Really cool to see the improvements that Honda's made trickling in from the factory team onto the stock motorcycle. We will be getting this thing on the dyno in the next couple of days, and we'll have some dyno results with the new intake, the new exhaust, and the updated mapping. So thank you guys for watching this video. We just got back from Canada. We were racing up there. Check out that video on our YouTube channel and website. And if you appreciate what we're doing, subscribe to our YouTube channel to let us know how we're doing. Once again, thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one.